Hey, what's up, guys? Asani Fisher here with an all-star break edition of the SCS Podcast. I know I haven't been coming out with these recently, but during the next few weeks, the last half of the NBA season and the playoffs, I'll get really into it, and hopefully we'll be putting out a decent amount of content for you guys. Lots to talk about right now. It's been a pretty spectacular trade deadline so far. I'm filming this on Wednesday afternoon, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen tonight, so it's perhaps Jimmy Butler will move, or there'll be other interesting news that comes out by the time you see this. But as of now, the big news has been Demarcus Cousins is now a New Orleans Pelican. It came a bit out of left field. Obviously, I was aware that Cousins was on the trade market, but I never had fully considered New Orleans as a potential suitor. From the Kings standpoint, I don't want to pile on. Most of the NBA community has been pretty vocal in saying that the Kings have been very mismanaged the past few years, and this trade is no exception. They didn't get nearly enough value for a player of Cousins' caliber. They were apparently really high on Buddy Hield. I'm not, for a multitude of reasons that I went into when I had my friend Dean on the podcast, of Dean on Draft. Basically just he's a bit of an older player, and in particular, we both were more of a fan of Murray, who ended up going to the Nuggets. But regardless, the point is, even if you substitute Murray in for Hield in this package that the Kings receive, it still wouldn't be enough value. It's not just the dislike for Hield as a prospect. It's just that they traded a top 10 talent for very marginal return. And while I understand the need to, quote unquote, go in another direction and get, have an infusion of good locker room guys and don't want to clean up the atmosphere, talent matters. And this just, the Kings once again lost a trade in the talent department, and that's not good at all for a rebuilding franchise. From the Pelicans' perspective, it's incredibly interesting. This is a great move from them. I'm a big fan. There's a it could result in, if they don't fit, you're dealing with two franchise players, and you're doing an interesting strategic choice of playing them, two big men who can't necessarily. Defense is the point of contention. The drawback there is, can this work defensively? I guess the hope is that both of them have. For one, you're going to get Cousins on his best behavior because he's just been traded. There's, relatively high morale being in a new city. So there hopefully won't be any of the low effort Demarcus Cousins. And then the hope is that both players, seeing a little bit decreased usage on offense, will be able to focus more on defense, and that it'll all work. Everything will be peachy keen, and they'll play to their talent level, which is really all you need. I mean, there's a non-zero chance that a year from now, we view Cousins as a top 5 player and Anthony Davis as the best player in the league. That's the type of upside you're dealing with these two players. So when you're dealing with a rebuilding situation, I just love the idea of going for it, basically gambling. This New Orleans they were heading towards basically where the Kings were heading towards. Years and years of a franchise player. You surround him with marginal talents, and when his contract runs out, he's not happy and is threatening to leave in free agency, so you might have to trade him before. It's just a road to mediocrity, and I like the Pelicans, making an interesting and high variance gamble here. And Drew Holiday also, I haven't even mentioned yet. I mentioned a year from now how we could view Cousins and Davis. Drew Holiday can be a top 30 player in the league. This is a really talented and interesting team now. And even aside, so from the talent level, I love it for all those reasons. I think, when you're a young rebuilding team, just accumulate as much talent as you can and worry about the rest later. And they crushed up from that perspective. But then there's the whole strategic aspect of things. And I think the New Orleans Pelicans are the first team in the modern era of basketball to really have two dominant post players. I mean, I guess the last dominant big man duo was like David Robinson and Tim Duncan. But even then, you were dealing with late career David Robinson, not really him in his prime. But anyway, I don't think we've really seen in the modern era a team that has two bigs like this. And in particular, I don't think we've ever seen a team that has the potential to make the Warriors abandon their death lineup. Their Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Iguodala, Durant, Draymond lineup. Versus every other team in the league, when the Warriors put that lineup out there, the mismatches that the Warriors cause are so much far greater than the mismatches that they give up on the other end, and other teams just can't handle it. And it's a strategic nightmare to try to figure out how to handle the Warriors' death lineup. The Pelicans are pretty much the only team that might make the Warriors not use that lineup, because Draymond guarding one of Boogie or Anthony Davis Draymond's up to the task. He's a great defender, but even that's going to be a fairly difficult matchup for him. And then you're going to have Kevin Durant guarding the other one. While Durant will exploit his mismatch on offense, he's going to get in loads of foul trouble on the other end, and he'll foul out. You just can't have that. So yeah, I think just from a strategic standpoint, this is pretty interesting. Made even better by the fact that this might be the 1-8 matchup, which really sucks for Golden State, because the last thing you want when dealing with a 1-8 matchup is like a fairly high variance, series where the 8 seed is introducing this new strategic concept you haven't seen before that might make you actually, despite the fact that you're the number 1 seed, might make you abandon your best lineup. Even if the Warriors still, maybe the Pelicans cause them a little bit of problems and the Warriors still win in 6 or 7 games, it's just, the tolls of going through that in the first round. You want an easy – this was previously shaping up to be whoever the Warriors faced in the first round, they were probably going to steamroll them in 4 games. And now it's like, man, the Pelicans facing them in the first round will be really interesting. And the Warriors can't be happy about the prospects of seeing that. And then just from a fan standpoint, I'm pretty happy to see Boogie Cousins finally freed from the Sacramento Kings organization. It's, he's the classic what if player. What if he had been drafted by an organization like the Spurs that had just, molded him and coached him up and, gotten rid of the attitude problems. The talent is obviously there. So hopefully this will be a situation where, we can see him. Now, I'm a fan of basketball. I'm a fan of great product. And this has the potential to be a great product with Boogie and Brow playing next to each other. So super excited for that. The other big trade was the Toronto Raptors acquiring Serge Ibaka from the Orlando Magic. Excuse me. From the Magic perspective, the Magic are another one of these teams like the Sacramento Kings, who I do not believe are managed very well. And I think that the fact that there are a lot of front offices have become sharper in recent years has really made the non-sharp front offices stand out even more. And they're just getting taken advantage of time and time again. This trade in a vacuum wasn't that bad, but when you couple it with the fact that they gave up Victor Oladipo to acquire Serge Ibaka, and yet less than a year later are flipping him for this package, it's just, it makes me sad, as a fan of young talent. It's like Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon's an awesome player, and at one point in time, he was going to get to grow up and play alongside Victor Oladipo and Tobias Harris, who are, I'm not saying they're future superstars or anything, but they're interesting pieces. It wouldn't surprise anyone if 5 years from now, Tobias Harris or Victor Oladipo was starting on a NBA championship team. Like, they have the ability to be very useful and NBA players going forward. And the Magic just got rid of them for a mishmash of win now type pieces that didn't fit together. And yeah, it's not pretty. And much like with the Kings, I don't want to just sit here and pile on the bad teams. I would rather focus on the other team in the trade and take note of what they did, because it's simply much more interesting to see team building and front office work done on a high level than on a low level. And I think this trade really illustrates that. From the Raptors' perspective, I think now you can finally, I think it's fair to say that the current front office there, Masai and his whole group, has now finally put in place they brought in their starting five. You look at Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Damari Carroll, Ibaka, and Jonas Valanciunas. It's fair to say that this is, that's their group they're rolling with. This is five players, at or near the primes of their careers. It's an older, starting five with, Lowry at or near his peak. It's a win now group. And it's a pretty well-built team, especially when you look at when you take a look at what the Raptors started with, rebuilding the team, when they, from like the Rudy Gay days. They've done a pretty damn good job of building this team. Ideally, Serge will cover for Valanciunas' weakness. That is Ibaka's ability to space the floor on offense and protect the rim on defense will allow you to play him alongside a big who can do neither. And so, because Jonas has a lot of value as a post scorer, it's just that him being able to do neither of those two things makes him unplayable in certain spots. So Ibaka conceptually should be a really good fit, although that was the same theory Orlando had with Vucevic and Ibaka. But I don't think the Orlando example was a really fair test of the will Ibaka work with a Vucevic type, because there was such a mismatch of win now players and players who clearly needed time to develop in Orlando that it just didn't fit together from that standpoint. Whereas in Toronto, these are all guys who are quality NBA players ready to contribute now to a title contender. So yeah, I think now, despite the fact that I think this Raptors team is very well built, and I like everything they've done, it fits together well. The question then becomes, is it a title contender now? And that's a far different question. My big concern still is the fact that when they play a team that has an elite wing defender, a Jimmy Butler, a Paul George, a Kawhi Leonard, LeBron when he's in the playoffs, when he's tuned into defense and playing his hardest. I just don't think an offense whose main weapon is DeMar DeRozan isolations that result in 2-point jump shots can really win a championship, basically. My main concern is I don't have data on this. I wish I did. So could be a bit selective memory here, but it seems like to me DeMar DeRozan crushes the bad defenders of the league, but he really gets owned by the Jimmy Butlers, Paul Georges at times. And in particular, when I watch him, it doesn't seem like him or the Raptors' offensive approach and what Dwayne Casey is instructing them to do, it doesn't seem like they're very aware of this. Too often I see them force the DeMar DeRozan isolation plays even when they're going up against a Paul George, when I think it would just be so much better for Lowry to take on more of an offensive role. Now, granted, this is compounded by the fact that DeMar DeRozan isn't a great three-point shooter. So when you're going up against a team like the Pacers, I think they're a great example, because Paul George is a great wing defender, but then Kyle Lowry kind of has a better matchup at point guard, and you'd rather run the offense through him probably. Going up against Teague. So ideally in that spot, you want DeMar DeRozan to be able to stand in the corner and shoot threes and make Paul George hug him, the fact that DeMar isn't a great three-point shooter really stymies that approach and make things even tougher. I think this is a spot where a coach really earns his pay. And unfortunately, I'm not fully convinced that Casey is on the Brad Stevens, Rick Carlisle, Greg Popovich level when it comes to game planning and scheming. Look, there's a lot of things that I can't evaluate about coaches behind closed doors, motivational type stuff, but like rotations and how they run the offense, I can evaluate, and I don't see Casey as an elite level coach in that regard, and I think this is a spot where they're going to need it. I think when they're going up against the Cavs and LeBron's locked in on defense, you really need to be able to have like a second. You need to have, there's both the psychological aspect to it and like just the actual strategic aspect. The psychological aspect, I have no clue. I admit, like, you need DeMar DeRozan to have the confidence to play his hardest, but then the awareness to at times be like, oh, wow, I'm being guarded by Paul George. Let me take a back seat and defer to Kyle here. And I don't know how, coaches approach that. But from the strategic aspect, I think that having him, take a back seat to Kyle is clearly the correct approach and what needs to be done. And yeah, I haven't seen enough of an awareness of that. I think basically a team like the Raptors all season long, they should be practicing for those spots. I would like to see them really trying a lot of new offensive things when DeMar has a tough matchup instead of just hammering home the DeMar isolation plays. And so that's my real big hang up with them. But apart from that, I really do like this trade, and I like the direction of their team in general. I think this is a well-built team, and it'll be fun to see them in the playoffs. Lastly, I wanted to hit on the Lou Williams to Houston trade. For the Lakers, for both teams, this makes a lot of sense. For the Lakers, obviously Lou wasn't a big part of their future with how old he is, and it makes sense to move him, and they got a reasonable return. And for the Rockets, this is just loads of fun. D'Antoni offense obviously doesn't move the needle much from a defensive perspective, which might end up, being what hurts them in the playoffs. But man, it's going to be a variance fest if they play the Warriors or the Spurs or really anyone. They're just going to launch a million threes, and they can get hot for a 7-game series and beat anyone. This is going to be super fun to watch. And just from that standpoint, I'm pretty excited. I wouldn't have thought of a lot of people saying it's a great fit. I personally wasn't considering it just because Harden can carry so much usage, and I didn't know if they really needed a player like Lou. But now that I imagine him there, I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty awesome to specifically in a D'Antoni like offense first, defense 10th, philosophy. I think it's a pretty cool move. Anyway, that's all the moves so far that I really want to talk about the trade deadline. Like I said, it's Wednesday afternoon as I'm recording this, so there's a decent chance there'll be another blockbuster by the time you're hearing this, but I'll have to save that for another podcast. Something else, random thing I wanted to talk about is that over the past few weeks, I'm sure you guys have seen, there have been a few of these exercises going around where you basically build a team to beat the Golden State Warriors, or what they're called. If you haven't seen them, just Google that. Build a team to beat the Warriors or something like that. You'll be able to find it, Google search. But lots of things where you get like a $15 salary cap and all these players are priced at different prices, and they want you to build a starting five that can take down the Warriors. And these were fun little exercises to do, and everyone, on Twitter, on a few message boards was posting their teams. And as I looked at it, I hit upon a few strategy nuances that I wanted to discuss now. I think they're kind of interesting. So basically, the way these exercises were constructed was that you couldn't quite accumulate as much talent as the Warriors have. That is, like, if you had priced the Warriors and put them on this, they would have ended up adding up to like over $20 and you had a $15 salary cap. So you weren't going to have as much talent as the Warriors. So you had to come up with some sort of strategy that would negate their edge and talent. And the one I came up with that I think makes a lot of sense was basically not having a point guard on the floor, not having a center and 4 small forwards, basically having like a Rudy Gobert, Gordon Hayward, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard lineup. I think that was one that could fit in one. There were a few of these that I'm referencing, and they all had different salary caps, so I'm not sure if that works in all of them, but I think that team I just mentioned worked in one of them. But basically, in all of them, I constructed teams of that ilk, teams that would force a really interesting strategic decision by the Warriors to, can we play Steph Curry? Can he guard anyone? Can you put who's he going to guard? Gordon Hayward? Like, how's that going to work? Or Jimmy Butler, I guess? I don't know who's the smallest. I don't know who you put Steph on there, right? Out of the 4 I mentioned, what was it? Jimmy Butler, Giannis, Kawhi, and Gordon Hayward. Yeah, like who does Steph guard there? Now, so obviously this is just a random little exercise I did. And like I said, I thought the strategic nuance, there was actually a takeaway that you can apply to NBA team building, basically. And that is that you don't have to play one short guy. Like there's this, I think just because traditionally the point guard has been a, 6 foot to 6'3" type, player, that teams think you have to have a guy of that height on the floor. And there's no reason you do. I'm fairly convinced that the NBA lineup of the future, maybe not till 30 years from now, who knows, but is 4 guys like Giannis and then a center, basically. And while in the meantime, the lack of talent, that's the wings like, Giannis or Kawhi are the most scarce commodity in the game today. So I realize you can't just build a team like this necessarily today, but I think there are a few cool things you can try, at least, that I would like to, if I was an NBA team, particularly if I was in this, going nowhere mode, or maybe like a lost rebuilding season, I would be giving lots of these types of things a chance. You definitely need one superstar. So you can't, and like I said, that's a scarce commodity. So you can't, you have to land one of those guys first. There's no secret to that aspect of things. You have to hope to trade for Jimmy Butler. All right. But like, you could reasonably build an NBA team that was like Jimmy Butler, Trevor Ariza, Robert Covington, Otto Porter, DeAndre Jordan. I don't know how those guys would all fit under the salary cap or exactly, but players of those sort, I think that's not a team with such incredible talent that you would be like, oh no, you could never get all those guys on one team. That's a reasonable, that's less talent than the other super teams of the NBA. And I think that's a super interesting thing to force other teams to not be able to play a point guard. Maybe have a traditional point guard in the roster and don't even break that out until the playoffs necessarily. But like, especially if you're like an 8 seed going up against a 1 seed, yeah, like just forcing the other team to not play their point guard by just not playing anyone under 6'8" is a strategic option that hasn't been explored enough. I'll put it at that. I don't know if there are any teams as currently constructed that could really do this. So I acknowledge that there's a real lack of depth at the small forward position. There's a lack of these guys out there. So it's tough to pull this off. So I know the game after the Nuggets acquired Plumlee, they ran a lineup that featured Hernan Gomez, Plumlee, and Jokic. I forget who the other 2 were. I want to say it was like Gary Harris and Moutier, or maybe Jameer Nelson. But so I'm not sure if the Plumlee Jokic front court could work, or if Hernan Gomez can play the 3 or all that. So maybe this is a bad example, but imagine that part work. I want to focus on the no point guard part. Imagine that those three players are fine playing the 3, 4, and 5 next to each other. If Denver, instead of Gary Harris and Moutier, played Wilson Chandler and Danilo Gallinari, that's a pretty sick lineup. Like assuming, like I said, the bigs can work well together, but like Gallo and Jokic and Wilson Chandler can all handle some ball handling. And then maybe if Plumlee doesn't work, maybe if the fit with Plumlee and Jokic isn't great, maybe try Fareed or another power forward. The point isn't that I think Plumlee and Jokic and Hernan Gomez are great front courts. The point is I think being able to use Wilson Chandler and Danilo Gallinari in lieu of as your backcourt is really interesting due to all these strategic nuances I'm pointing out right now. And I would also note that I would really experiment with this with my second unit if I was an NBA team. Because right now, the strategy a lot of teams employ with their second unit is that they try to get an undersized shooting guard who is just a bit too small to really be a shooting guard, so they call him a point guard / shooting guard hybrid. And this lack of height really prevents him from being a good enough defender to be a starting level player. So they run him with a second unit and have him be their sixth man type. Jamal Crawford, there's tons of guys in this ilk. This is what a lot of teams try to do. And this strategy counters that very well, and that it makes those guys kind of unplayable. So yeah, I might mess around with this a bit if I was an NBA team with my second unit, and I might, bring in. I think a main takeaway is that all these small forward types are very underrated. There's a real lack of them available. So yeah, so I would prioritize those guys in free agency as well. Also, this isn't necessarily on the NBA level, but for Team USA, I would without a doubt employ this strategy. There's just a starting five. I don't know if all these guys are going to want to play in the next Olympic Games, but a starting five of like Kawhi, Paul George, LeBron, Kevin Durant, and then Draymond Green. That's just unstoppable. Like that's the best team in the world. Like if you really want to put the best team, that team wins every game by 100. Like how did they ever lose? They're unguardable. I really think Team USA should not bring in as great as like Harden and Westbrook, and maybe have Steph just because the ability to space the floor is always valuable. But otherwise, you really don't need any guy under 6'7". I think that would be a really cool spot to see this strategy exploited. Was there anything else? Oh, I wanted to just quickly mention this. This is a fairly meaningless thing, but me and my friend were talking about this the other day, and I thought it was kind of cool. We were trying to come up with the question was, not including Draymond Green, can you come up with a team of NBA players who were drafted in the second round who could beat the Warriors? So basically come up with an 8-man rotation of second round players and match them up with the Warriors. The team I came up with, I think they would probably still lose to the Warriors, but it would be very interesting. It's Isaiah Thomas, Goran Dragic at point, and then a wing rotation of Chris Middleton, Jay Crowder, Danny Green, and then a big rotation of Paul Millsap, Marc Gasol, and Jokic. They could do so. We were talking about going big just a second ago. They could run out Jokic, Marc Gasol, and Paul Millsap, and that would be a pretty cool thing to see if the Warriors can handle. Anyway, I have no real point with that hypothetical there. I was just literally doing that the other day, and I thought it was a pretty cool question. I guess basically, one, do you agree with that team? Would you? There are a few other choices. I think like DeAndre Jordan, Norman Powell were a few of the other guys I considered. Lou Williams, I think, might actually have been a second rounder. I don't remember. But yeah, so like, for one, do you agree with that team? And two, do you think they could beat the Warriors? I think it's a pretty cool thing to hear some feedback on. So let me know what you think about that. And that'll wrap it up for this edition. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to get these out more often. So hopefully I'll be seeing you guys soon. All right, later.